They said Caleb Rourke died in the desert 3 years ago. They were wrong. The gunslinger who once turned Red Mesa into a legend rode back into town at dawn, not for glory, not for gold, but for answers about the uncle who raised him. Within hours, he'd discover the brutal truth. His uncle's death was no accident, and the woman now ruling the ranch wants him buried beside the old man. In a town bought by blood money and lies, Caleb Rourke has become the most dangerous threat to a conspiracy that reaches deeper than anyone imagined. Drop a like and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. The desert wind carried whispers of death across Red Mesa long before Caleb Rourke's shadow fell upon its dusty streets. 3 years. That's how long he'd been gone, wandering territories where his name meant nothing and his past couldn't follow. 3 years of drifting through mining camps and railroad towns, sleeping under stars that asked no questions, drinking in saloons where nobody cared who you'd been before the bottle touched your lips. But the desert has a way of calling men back to the places they tried to forget. The telegram had found him in a nowhere town called Salvation Creek, handed over by a one-eyed postal clerk who looked like he'd been dead for a week but hadn't noticed yet. The paper was yellow with trail dust, the words simple and devastating. Your uncle is dead. Come home. J. Morrison, attorney. Caleb had read those words a dozen times on the 4-day ride back, each reading making them feel less real. His uncle, Silas Rourke, was the kind of man who seemed carved from the same stone as the mountains themselves. Indestructible. Eternal. The kind of man who'd built an empire from a patch of worthless scrubland in sheer bloody-minded determination. Dead. The word didn't fit. Red Mesa appeared on the horizon like a mirage, shimmering in the late afternoon heat. The town had grown since Caleb last saw it. More buildings, wider streets, a church steeple that hadn't existed before. His uncle's influence, no doubt. Silas Rourke had always believed that civilization needed churches and law before it could call itself anything more than a camp for outlaws and dreamers. Caleb urged his horse forward, feeling the weight of eyes before he saw any faces. The main street stretched before him like an accusation. False front buildings lined both sides. The mercantile, the land office, the Silver Dollar Saloon with its painted sign already fading in the relentless sun. A few townspeople paused in their business to stare at the stranger riding in, their expressions shifting through surprise, recognition, and something else Caleb couldn't quite name. Fear, maybe, or guilt. His uncle's ranch lay 3 miles outside town, but the attorney's office was here, above the bank. Caleb dismounted in front of the hitching post, his boots hitting the boardwalk with a hollow sound that seemed too loud in the strange quiet that had fallen over the street. The bank's interior offered brief respite from the heat. A clerk with nervous hands directed him upstairs, where J. Morrison's office waited behind a door of frosted glass. The attorney was younger than Caleb expected, maybe 40, with the kind of soft hands that had never held anything rougher than a pen. He rose from behind his desk as Caleb entered, extending one of those soft hands in greeting. "Mr. Rourke, I wasn't certain you'd come." "Your telegram didn't leave much choice." Caleb ignored the offered hand, moving instead to the window that overlooked the street. "Tell me what happened." Morrison cleared his throat, settling back into his chair with visible relief at not having to maintain the social pretense. "Your uncle died 6 weeks ago. Heart attack, according to Dr. Brennan. He was found in his study at the ranch, slumped over his desk. My uncle's heart was stronger than locomotive steel. Nevertheless, who found him?" "His wife. Mrs. Evelyn Mercer. Evelyn Rourke, I should say. They'd been married 8 months. The words hit Caleb like a physical blow. "Married? You didn't know?" Morrison's eyebrows rose. "I assumed he'd written to you." Caleb turned from the window, studying the attorney's face for signs of deception. "My uncle and I hadn't spoken in some time. Who is she?" "She came to Red Mesa about a year ago. A widow from St. Louis, or so she claimed. Refined. Educated. Your uncle was quite taken with her." Morrison shuffled papers on his desk, avoiding Caleb's gaze. "The marriage was something of a surprise to everyone." "I bet it was." Caleb moved closer to the desk, his voice dropping to something quieter and infinitely more dangerous. "What aren't you telling me? I'm sure I don't know what you You're a terrible liar, Morrison. Your hands are shaking. The attorney's fingers stilled on the papers. For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the wall clock and the distant murmur of voices from the street below. There were irregularities, Morrison said finally. In the weeks before his death, your uncle changed his will 3 times. Each version left more control to his new wife. And the final version left everything to her: the ranch, the cattle, the water rights, the contracts with the railroad. Everything except... Morrison pulled a sealed envelope from his desk drawer. He left you this, with specific instructions that it be delivered to you personally and only after his death. Caleb took the envelope, recognizing his uncle's heavy script across the front. For Caleb, when I'm gone. There's more, Morrison continued. Your uncle also established a trust, a substantial one. It can't be touched by anyone except you, and it specifically states that you have the right to contest any changes made to his estate in the 6 months prior to his death. He knew. The realization settled in Caleb's gut like cold lead. He knew something was wrong. Morrison said nothing, but his silence spoke volumes. Caleb broke the seal on the envelope, unfolding the single page inside. His uncle's handwriting was shakier than he remembered, the letters struggling across the paper like wounded soldiers. Caleb, if you're reading this, then I've run out of time. There's poison in my house, boy, but it doesn't come from a bottle. It wears silk dresses and smiles like an angel. I was a fool. An old fool who thought a pretty face and soft words could fill the emptiness your aunt left behind. But Evelyn isn't what she seems. Neither is that brother of hers. Victor Hale showed up 2 months after the wedding, claimed to be her only family. I gave him work at the ranch because I thought it would please her. Instead, I gave a snake a warm place to nest. I've seen the way they look at each other when they think I'm not watching. I've heard them talking late at night, their voices carrying through the halls like whispers from a crypt. They're planning something, and I'm running out of time to stop it. The ranch is yours by right, boy. Your father and I built it together, and when he died, I promised I'd hold it for you until you were ready to come home. Don't let them take it. Don't let them win. Come back, Caleb. Come back and fight. Silas Caleb read the letter twice, then carefully folded it and slipped it into his vest pocket. When he looked up, Morrison was watching him with eyes that held equal parts hope and terror. You believe him, the attorney said. It wasn't a question. My uncle never lied, not even when the truth cost him. Caleb moved toward the door, then paused. Where is she now? Evelyn? At the ranch. She's held a sort of court there since your uncle's death. Half the town goes out there every Sunday for dinner. She's become quite influential. I'm sure she has. Caleb pulled open the door. I'll need to see my uncle's body. He's buried in the family plot next to your aunt. Then I'll need to see the death certificate, and I'll need to talk to the doctor who signed it. Morrison's face went pale. Mr. Rourke, I must advise caution. Mrs. Rourke has powerful friends. The sheriff, for one. And there are men who work for her, men who aren't ranch hands, if you understand my meaning. Gunmen. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Caleb tipped his hat. Thank you for your time, Morrison, and for your honesty, what little you could manage. The attorney rose from his desk, his voice urgent. Mr. Rourke, Caleb, if your uncle was right, if there really is a conspiracy, then you're in danger, serious danger. These people have already killed once, if his suspicions are true. They won't hesitate to kill again. I'm counting on it, Caleb said quietly. Dead men make mistakes, and I'm very good at making people nervous. He descended the stairs and stepped back into the furnace heat of the afternoon. The street had changed in the brief time he'd been inside. More people now, but they moved with purpose, heads down, avoiding his gaze. The message had spread quickly then. Caleb Rourke was back. He led his horse to the livery stable, a ramshackle building at the edge of town run by an old-timer named Polk, who'd been shoeing horses since before the territory had a name. The old man looked up from his work, squinting through the dim interior. Well, hell, thought you were dead. Disappointed? Polk spat tobacco juice into the straw. Ain't my place to be disappointed or otherwise. Your money's good as anyone's. He examined Caleb's horse with the critical eye of a man who'd forgotten more about horseflesh than most people ever learned. Fine animal. You treat him right? Better than I treat myself. That ain't saying much, knowing you. Polk took the reins, running his gnarled hands along the horse's legs. You hear about your uncle? Among other things. Shame that. Good man? Silas Rourke. Hard but fair. Paid his debts and kept his word. The old man's voice dropped. Died too convenient, if you ask me. Which nobody did, so I kept my mouth shut. Caleb felt something tighten in his chest. Convenient how? Signed over a big parcel of land to the railroad 2 days before he died. Prime grazing land that he'd been holding on to for years, said it would be worth a fortune someday. Then suddenly, he just hands it over for half what it's worth. Polk shook his head. Man doesn't build an empire by making stupid deals. Unless someone forced his hand. I didn't say that. Everyone in this town seems real careful about what they don't say. Caleb leaned against a support post, watching the old man work. Tell me about the wife. Polk's hand stilled on the horse's mane. Beautiful woman, manners like a queen, showed up about a year back, staying at the hotel, claiming she needed the desert air for her health. Your uncle saw her at church one Sunday, and that was that. Courted her proper, married her in 3 months. Fast work. Love makes fools of smart men. Polk resumed his grooming. Or maybe it wasn't love at all. Maybe it was loneliness. Your uncle never got over losing your aunt. 20 years they were married, and when the fever took her, something in him died too. He threw himself into work, into building the ranch bigger and bigger, but you could see the emptiness in his eyes. And Evelyn filled that emptiness. Like water filling a well, or poison filling a cup, depending on how you look at it. The old man met Caleb's gaze. Her brother showed up a couple months after the wedding, Victor Hale. Mean-looking son of a bitch with eyes like a snake. Your uncle gave him work, but he didn't do much working, if you follow me. I follow you just fine. Got himself a crew, too. Men who ain't from around here. Men who wear their guns low and their morals lower. Polk spat again. Used to be this was a peaceful town. Now there's fights every Saturday night, and folks are scared to speak their minds. Caleb absorbed this information in silence, piecing together the picture his uncle had painted in that desperate letter. A beautiful woman, a dangerous brother, a sudden death, a conspiracy that had transformed a peaceful town into something darker. Where can I find this Victor Hale, You planning something stupid? Probably. Polk sighed. Most days he's at the ranch, but Friday nights he comes to town, drinks at the Silver Dollar until he's mean drunk, then picks a fight with whoever's fool enough to look at him wrong. Sheriff never does nothing about it. Claims it's all just high spirits. What's the sheriff's name? Tom Wyatt. Been wearing the badge about 6 months. Came recommended by Mrs. Rourke herself, seeing as the old sheriff retired sudden-like. How sudden? Retired on a Monday. Found dead in his cabin on Tuesday. Horse kicked him in the head, supposedly. Polk's voice carried a weight of unspoken doubt. Funny thing, though, old Sheriff Carson had been around horses his whole life. Knew which end bit and which end kicked. Seems unlikely he'd make such a greenhorn mistake. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed made Caleb's blood run cold. This wasn't just about his uncle's death. This was systematic, calculated. Someone was taking control of Red Mesa piece by piece, and anyone who stood in the way ended up in the ground. I'm going to need my horse ready to ride at a moment's notice, Caleb said. Day or night. Polk nodded slowly. You're planning to stir up trouble. Trouble's already here. I'm just planning to survive it. Your uncle used to say the same thing. Didn't work out so well for him. My uncle was a builder. I'm a destroyer. Caleb pushed off from the post. There's a difference. He left the livery and made his way to the Silver Dollar Saloon. The interior was dark and cool, smelling of whiskey, sawdust, and old tobacco smoke. A handful of men occupied tables scattered throughout the room, their conversations dying as Caleb entered. The bartender was a heavy-set man with a scarred face and cautious eyes. He set down the glass he was polishing and regarded Caleb with the wariness of someone who'd learned to read dangerous men at a glance. What'll it be? Whiskey. Your best bottle, not the swill you serve the regulars. The bartender's eyebrows rose slightly, but he reached for a bottle on the top shelf and poured 2 fingers into a clean glass. Caleb tossed a silver dollar on the bar, more than twice what the drink was worth. and took his glass to a table in the corner where he could watch the door. The whiskey burned going down, but it was honest burn, not the rot-gut fire of cheap liquor. Caleb savored it, letting his eyes adjust to the dim interior while his ears picked up the threads of conversation starting to resume around him. They were talking about him. Not openly, but in that sideways manner of men who wanted to gossip but didn't want to be caught at it. The Rourke kid. Thought he was dead. Wonder what he wants. Wonder if he knows. The door swung open, bringing with it a shaft of sunlight and a Mexican man who moved with the easy grace of someone comfortable in his own skin. He was young, maybe 25, with dark eyes that missed nothing and a knife scar running from his left ear to his jaw. 2 guns rode his hips, worn and well-maintained. The newcomer's gaze found Caleb immediately, and something like recognition flickered across his face. He crossed to the bar, ordered tequila, then turned and walked directly to Caleb's table. "Mind if I sit?" Caleb gestured to the empty chair. "Free country." "That's a matter of opinion." The man settled into the chair, his movements economical and controlled. "Miguel Rivera, though most folks call me Fox. Interesting nickname. I'm quick, I'm clever, and I'm hard to kill." Fox grinned, showing white teeth. "Also, I once ate a chicken while hiding from a posse, and the sheriff swore he only found fox tracks. Story got out, name stuck." Despite everything, Caleb felt the corner of his mouth twitch. "You always this friendly with strangers?" "Only the ones who look like they're about to walk into a war." Fox's expression sobered. "You're Caleb Rourke. News travels fast. In a town this size, news travels before you even make it. I heard you were back about 30 seconds after you tied your horse outside the lawyer's office." Fox leaned back in his chair, studying Caleb with open curiosity. "Question is, why are you back?" "Family business." "The kind of family business that gets a man killed?" Caleb met the other man's gaze steadily. "Possibly." "Good." Fox's grin returned. "I was getting bored." "You looking for trouble?" "I'm looking for justice. There's a difference." Fox's voice hardened. "Your uncle gave me a job when nobody else would. Saw past the Mexican skin and the reputation and treated me like a man. I owed him, still do." "He's dead." "Which is why I owe him even more. Dead men can't collect their debts, so it falls to the living to settle accounts." Fox finished his tequila in one swallow. "Your uncle was murdered. I'd stake my life on it. And the people who killed him are walking around this town like they own it, because they do own it now." "You have proof?" "I have eyes and ears and enough sense to see what's right in front of me." Fox leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. 3 weeks before your uncle died, I was working the fence line near the north pasture, heard voices carrying on the wind, followed the sound and found your uncle and that brother-in-law of his, Victor Hale, having what you might call a disagreement. "About what?" "About the railroad deal. Your uncle said he'd never agreed to sell that land. Said someone had forged his signature on the contract. Victor told him he was getting old, getting forgetful, that he'd signed it himself and just didn't remember." Fox's jaw tightened. "Your uncle damn near put a bullet in him right there. Said if he ever caught Victor lying to him again, he'd kill him and face whatever consequences came. And 3 weeks later, my uncle was dead. Heart attack, clean and convenient. Doctor signed the certificate without asking too many questions, and the widow cried pretty tears at the funeral." Fox's eyes glittered with cold anger. 2 days after they put your uncle in the ground, Victor Hale hired 6 new men, not cowboys, gunfighters, the kind of men who kill for money and sleep sound at night. Caleb absorbed this, feeling the shape of the conspiracy growing clearer. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're the rightful heir. Because I think you're planning to do something about what happened. And because I'm tired of watching evil people win." Fox stood, dropping a coin on the table for his drink. "I'm staying in a room above the mercantile. You need help. You know where to find me." "What makes you think I'll need help?" "Because they're going to try to kill you." Fox said it matter-of-factly, without drama or emphasis. "Probably tonight, definitely soon. Evelyn Rourke didn't go through all this trouble just to let the rightful heir waltz back into town and claim what's his. She'll send someone. Maybe Victor. Maybe one of those gunmen he hired. Maybe all of them. Let them come." "That's what your uncle said. Look how well it worked out for him. Fox moved toward the door, then paused. Pride's a fine thing, Rourke, but it makes for a poor shield against a bullet in the dark. He left before Caleb could respond, leaving behind the smell of tequila and questions. Caleb finished his whiskey and rose to leave. As he reached the door, the bartender called out, "Mr. Rourke!" Caleb turned. The bartender was polishing glasses again, his hands moving in steady circles. "Your uncle was a good man. Helped me set up this place when nobody else would stake me the money. If there's anything you need, anything at all, you just ask. I pay my debts too." Caleb nodded his thanks and stepped back into the dying light of late afternoon. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of amber and blood. Caleb stood on the boardwalk, studying the town his uncle had helped build. Somewhere in these buildings, in these streets, was the truth about Silas Rourke's death. And somewhere, possibly very close, were the people who'd killed him. He could feel eyes on him. Not the curious stares of townspeople anymore, but something sharper, more focused. The kind of attention that came from people who were trying to decide if you were a threat that needed eliminating. Good, Caleb thought. Let them watch. Let them worry. Let them make the first move. He was about to head back to the livery when he noticed the church at the end of the street. On impulse, he walked toward it, his boots echoing on the boardwalk. The church was simple but well built, with a tall steeple and whitewashed walls that gleamed in the fading light. Inside, the air was cooler, tinged with the smell of candle wax and old wood. Empty pews stretched toward an altar adorned with simple decorations. No one else was present, which suited Caleb fine. He walked down the center aisle, his footsteps muffled by dust and time. Near the front, he found what he was looking for, a registry book sitting on a small table. He flipped it open, running his finger down the entries until he found his uncle's name. Silas Rourke, married to Evelyn Mercer, December 10th, 1884. Below that, in different ink, Silas Rourke, died April 3rd, 1885. May he rest in peace. 4 months. His uncle had been married for just 4 months before he died. Caleb continued reading. Baptisms, deaths, marriages, the ordinary record of life in a frontier town. Then he found something that made him stop. Victor Hale arrived Red Mesa January 15th, 1885, brother to Evelyn Rourke. The date bothered him. Victor had shown up just over a month after the wedding, not right away, as one might expect if he'd come to support his sister, but exactly timed to arrive after the marriage was secure, after Evelyn had established herself as Silas Rourke's wife. Planning, patience, precision. These people knew what they were doing. A door opened behind him. Caleb's hand moved toward his gun, but he forced himself to relax when he saw it was only the minister, a thin man in his 50s with kind eyes and the permanent stoop of someone who'd spent his life bending to listen to confessions. "Can I help you, son?" "Just looking at history, Reverend." "Ah." The minister moved closer, recognizing Caleb. "You're Silas's nephew. I'm Reverend Thomas. I presided at your uncle's funeral. I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you." But Caleb closed the registry. "Did you know my uncle well?" "As well as he'd let anyone know him. He came to services most Sundays, though I think it was more from habit than faith. He'd lost so much. Your father, your aunt, and in some ways you when you left." The Reverend's expression grew sad. But when he met Evelyn, something changed. He seemed lighter, happier. I truly believed she'd given him a reason to live again. And then he died. Yes, it was a shock to everyone. But the doctor was clear. His heart simply gave out. These things happen, especially to men who've lived hard lives. Caleb studied the minister's face, looking for signs of doubt or deception. He found only sincere grief. "You believe that? That it was natural causes?" Reverend Thomas hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I believe that we cannot always understand why things happen, but I also believe that evil exists in this world, and sometimes it wears a pleasant face." He met Caleb's gaze. "Be careful, son. Red Mesa has changed since you left. There are shadows here now that weren't here before. Shadows can be burned away with enough light, or they can swallow the light entirely." The Reverend placed a gentle hand on Caleb's shoulder. "Your uncle was a strong man. If you couldn't fight what killed him, what makes you think you can? Because I'm not fighting for an empire, Caleb said quietly. I'm fighting for the truth, and I don't plan on fighting fair. He left the church as the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky. Night was falling fast, bringing with it the promise of violence and revelation. Caleb could feel it in the air, in the way the town seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to break. He made his way back to the livery, where Polk had prepared a stall for his horse and set out a bedroll in the loft. You planning on sleeping here? The old man asked. For tonight. The hotel seems like the good way to get my throat cut. Smart thinking. Polk handed him a plate of beans and hard bread. Not fancy, but it'll keep you alive. That's all I'm asking. Caleb climbed to the loft and settled in, positioning himself where he could see both the front and back entrances. He ate the simple meal, checking his guns for the third time that day. 2 revolvers, both Colt .45s, both cleaned and loaded with 6 rounds each. A knife in his boot, another in his belt. A Derringer hidden in his vest pocket. He'd learned long ago that staying alive meant staying prepared. As darkness fell completely, Caleb lay back on the bedroll, his hand resting on one of his guns. Sleep would come in fits and starts tonight, if it came at all. Every sound would need investigating, every shadow watched. But he was ready. The desert wind whispered through the gaps in the stable walls, carrying with it the scent of sage and dust and secrets. Somewhere out there, in the darkness beyond Red Mesa, his uncle's murderers were planning their next move. Somewhere, Evelyn Rourke and her brother were deciding what to do about the inconvenient heir who'd come back to claim his birthright. Let them plan, Caleb thought. Let them scheme and plot and gather their forces. Because when morning came, he was riding out to the ranch. He was going to look his uncle's widow in the eye, and he was going to see the truth for himself. Whatever came after that, war, death, justice, or vengeance, would be decided by the desert and the gun. The way it had always been decided in this harsh, unforgiving land. Dawn broke over Red Mesa like a wound splitting open, all red and raw and unforgiving. Caleb woke to the sound of horses in the street below and voices carrying through the morning chill. He'd slept maybe 3 hours, his rest broken by every creak of wood and whisper of wind. But 3 hours was more than he'd expected, and in this business, any sleep you got was sleep you'd earned. He descended from the loft to find Polk already at work, feeding the horses and mucking out stalls with the methodical efficiency of a man who'd done the same task for 40 years. Coffee's on the stove, the old man said without looking up. Figured you'd want it strong. You figured right. Caleb poured himself a tin cup of coffee so thick it barely qualified as liquid. The first sip burned all the way down, chasing away the last cobwebs of sleep. He drank standing by the stable door, watching Red Mesa wake up around him. The town looked different in daylight, less threatening maybe, or maybe just better at hiding its teeth. You still planning on riding out to the ranch? Polk asked. Soon as I finish this coffee. Alone. That's the plan. Polk shook his head, driving his pitchfork into a pile of hay. Your uncle used to say planning was for men who had time to waste. Said in the desert, you either moved fast or died slow. My uncle also said trust was earned in inches and lost in miles. Caleb finished his coffee and set the cup down. I don't know who I can trust in this town yet. Until I do, I work alone. Fair enough, but you might want to know that Victor Hale rode into town about an hour before dawn. Heard him and his boys raising hell down at the Silver Dollar. They only just left, maybe 20 minutes ago. Caleb felt his muscles tense. Headed back to the ranch? That'd be my guess, which means they know you're here and they know you're coming. You ride out there now, you'll be walking into whatever welcome they've prepared. Can't be helped. I need to see my uncle's widow face to face, need to look in her eyes when she lies to me. Polk studied him for a long moment. You're just like your father, you know that? Same stubborn streak, same death wish disguised as courage. My father died saving a woman from a burning building. That's not a death wish, that's being a man. Your father died leaving you orphaned at 10 years old. You can dress it up however you want, but dead is still dead. The old man's voice softened. I'm not trying to talk you out of this, boy. I know better than to argue with a Rourke once their mind's set. Just be smart. Be careful. And if things go sideways, you ride hard and don't look back. Caleb gripped the old man's shoulder briefly, the closest thing to affection he could manage. Then he saddled his horse and rode out of Red Mesa as the sun climbed higher in a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The road to his uncle's ranch cut through open desert for the first mile, then climbed into rolling hills covered with scrub brush and the occasional twisted juniper. Caleb knew every turn, every rock formation, every dry wash. He'd ridden this road 1,000 times as a boy, racing his uncle back to the ranch house, feeling the wind in his face and believing the whole world belonged to him. That world felt very far away now. The ranch appeared gradually, revealing itself in pieces as the road crested the final hill. First the windmill, its blades turning lazily in the morning breeze, then the corrals and outbuildings. Finally, the main house itself, a sprawling adobe structure with a red tile roof and a wide veranda that wrapped around 3 sides. His uncle had built that house with his own hands, mixing the mud and straw, laying each adobe brick with the kind of patience that couldn't be taught. Caleb's father had helped, and together the 2 brothers had created something that looked like it had grown from the desert itself, rather than being imposed upon it. Now it belonged to a woman his uncle had known for less than a year. Caleb rode slowly through the main gate, his eyes cataloging everything. New fence posts, fresh paint on the barn, and men, at least 6 of them scattered around the property, all wearing guns and watching him with the flat, emotionless stares of professionals. These weren't cowboys. Polk had been right about that. He dismounted in front of the house, looping his reins loosely over the hitching post. The front door opened before he could knock, and a woman stepped onto the veranda. Evelyn Rourke was beautiful. There was no denying that. Tall and slender, with auburn hair pulled back in an elegant twist and green eyes that seemed to catch and hold the light. She wore a black dress that managed to be both morning attire and somehow flattering, cut in a style that spoke of St. Louis or San Francisco rather than frontier practicality. "Mr. Rourke," she said, her voice like honey over gravel, "I've been expecting you. Have you?" "Of course. When I heard you were in town, I knew you'd come." She gestured toward the door. "Please, come inside. We have much to discuss." Caleb climbed the steps, acutely aware of the gunmen positioned around the yard. Evelyn led him through the entrance hall, the same hall where he'd tracked mud as a boy and earned his aunt's scolding, and into his uncle's study. The room looked exactly as he remembered, books lining the walls, a massive oak desk dominating the center, the smell of leather and pipe tobacco still hanging in the air, as if his uncle had just stepped out and would return any moment. But he wouldn't, and the woman settling into his chair made sure Caleb understood that. "Please sit." Evelyn indicated the chair across from the desk. "Can I offer you anything? Coffee? Whiskey?" "Information." Caleb remained standing. "About how my uncle really died?" Something flickered in those green eyes. Surprise, maybe, or respect. "I'm not sure I understand. Your uncle suffered a heart attack. Dr. Brennan can confirm whatever you paid him to confirm." The words hung in the air between them, sharp as broken glass. Evelyn's expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on the arms of the chair. "That's quite an accusation." "It's not an accusation? Not yet. Right now it's just a question." Caleb moved closer to the desk, his voice dropping. "But it's going to become an accusation real quick, unless you start telling me the truth." "The truth." Evelyn rose from the chair with fluid grace, moving to the window that overlooked the ranch yard. "The truth is that your uncle was a lonely man who found companionship in his final months. The truth is that I cared for him deeply. And the truth is that his heart was weaker than his pride would admit. My uncle's heart was fine. I have it on good authority that he was in perfect health right up until he died." "Whose authority? Some bitter ranch hand who thinks he knows better than a trained physician?" Evelyn turned from the window, and now there was steel beneath the honey in her voice. "Your uncle was 63 years old. He'd lived hard, worked hard, and grieved hard. His heart gave out. It's tragic, but it's not suspicious. The timing is suspicious. The circumstances are suspicious. The fact that you changed his will 3 times in as many weeks is suspicious." "Ah." Evelyn's smile was cold. "So that's what this is really about. Money. The ranch. You've come to contest the will. I've come to find out who killed my uncle. The ranch is secondary. Your uncle left you a substantial trust. Be grateful for that, and move on with your life, Mr. Rourke. There's nothing for you here but pain and disappointment. Before Caleb could respond, the study door opened. A man entered without knocking, and Caleb knew immediately this had to be Victor Hale. He was younger than Caleb expected, maybe 35, with the kind of lean build that spoke of speed rather than strength. His face might have been handsome if not for the cruelty that lived in his eyes and the twist of his mouth. He wore 2 guns, positioned for a cross-draw, and his hands hovered near them in a way that was probably unconscious but no less threatening for it. "Well, well," Victor said, looking Caleb up and down like a man appraising livestock. "The prodigal nephew returns. Evelyn, you should have told me we had company. I'd have arranged a proper welcome." "Mr. Rourke was just leaving," Evelyn said smoothly. "Was I?" Victor's smile widened. "Oh, I think you were. See, this is private property now, my sister's property. And we don't take kindly to trespassers making wild accusations and disturbing the peace." Caleb shifted his weight slightly, a subtle movement that put his gun hand in better position. "Funny. Last I checked, this was still Rourke land. Has been for 20 years. One piece of paper doesn't change that. One piece of paper is all it takes. It's called a will, and it's legal and binding." Victor moved closer, his spurs jingling with each step. "But if you want to contest it, you're welcome to try. Hire yourself a lawyer, file your claim, wait 2 or 3 years for it to wind through the courts. By then, this ranch will have changed hands a dozen times, and you won't have a legal leg to stand on." "Is that the plan? Sell it off piece by piece?" "The plan is none of your concern." Victor was close now, close enough that Caleb could smell the whiskey on his breath despite the early hour. "Your uncle is dead. My sister owns this land, and you, boy, are about 5 seconds away from getting thrown off it. I'd like to see you try." The tension in the room ratcheted up another notch. Caleb could feel it, thick as smoke, dangerous as nitroglycerin. Victor's hands twitched near his guns. Outside, Caleb heard the scuff of boots on wood as the gunman moved closer to the house. Then Evelyn laughed. It was a surprising sound, genuinely amused, and it broke the moment like a hammer through ice. "Gentlemen, please. There's no need for violence. We're all civilized people here." She moved between them, placing one hand on Victor's arm. "Mr. Rourke is understandably upset about his uncle's death. He's looking for someone to blame, and we happen to be convenient targets. It's a natural response to grief." "I'm not grieving," Caleb said quietly. "I'm investigating." "Then investigate all you want. You'll find nothing because there's nothing to find. Your uncle died of natural causes, and no amount of suspicion or wild theories will change that." Evelyn's voice hardened. "But I'll tell you what I told the sheriff when he asked his questions. I was a good wife to Silas Rourke. I made his last months happy. And I won't have his memory tarnished by baseless accusations from a nephew who couldn't even be bothered to visit while the man was alive." The words hit harder than any punch, because they were true, at least in part. Caleb hadn't visited, hadn't written, hadn't tried to mend the rift that had opened between them the day Caleb left the ranch, angry and young and determined to prove he didn't need anyone. "You're right," Caleb admitted. "I wasn't here. I should have been. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving until I know the truth." "The truth is whatever we make it," Victor said. "And right now, the truth is that you're trespassing. So either you walk out of here on your own, or my boys will help you along. Your choice." Caleb looked from Victor to Evelyn and back again. They stood together, united in their deception, confident in their power. And why shouldn't they be confident? They'd already gotten away with murder once. What was running off one inconvenient heir? "I'll leave," Caleb said. "For now. But this isn't over. It never is with men like you." Victor's hand dropped from his gun, but his eyes stayed cold and hard. "You just can't let things lie. Always got to poke at what's dead and buried. Well, let me give you some free advice, Rourke. Sometimes when you dig up the past, all you find is your own grave." Caleb turned without another word and walked out of the study, through the hall, and back onto the veranda. The gunmen had closed in while he'd been inside, forming a loose semicircle around his horse. 6 of them, all armed, all watching him with the patience of men who killed for money and didn't much care when or how it happened. He mounted slowly, taking his time, refusing to show any sign of fear or hurry. Then he rode out through the gate and back toward town, feeling 6 pairs of eyes on his back every step of the way. He made it a quarter mile before the rage hit him. It rose up from somewhere deep in his chest, hot and violent and demanding release. Caleb pulled his horse to a stop on a rise overlooking the ranch and let himself feel it. The anger at his uncle's murderers, the fury at his own absence, the helpless frustration of knowing the truth but being unable to prove it. They're right, you know. Caleb's hand went to his gun before he recognized the voice. Miguel Fox sat astride his own horse, maybe 20 yards away, half hidden in the shadow of a rock outcropping. He must have followed Caleb from town and waited here while the confrontation played out. "What are you doing here?" "Making sure you didn't get yourself killed on your first visit." Fox urged his horse forward until they were side by side. "How'd it go?" "About how you'd expect. Denials, threats, and thinly veiled violence." "Did you learn anything useful?" Caleb thought about Evelyn's calculated performance, Victor's barely controlled aggression, the gunmen positioned like pieces on a chessboard. "I learned they're scared. That's something." "Scared people are dangerous people." "So am I." Fox studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, I believe you are. Question is, are you dangerous enough?" They rode back to Red Mesa in silence, taking a different route that kept them off the main road. Fox seemed to know every deer trail and dry wash, navigating with the ease of someone who'd spent years learning the land's secrets. "You're good at this," Caleb observed. "The tracking, the hiding. You learned that in the war? Didn't fight in any war. Learned it staying alive when half of Texas wanted me dead for being born on the wrong side of the Rio Grande." Fox's voice carried no bitterness, just statement of fact. "You learn quick when the alternative is bleeding out in some arroyo while the buzzards circle." "Why'd they want you dead?" "Does it matter? I was Mexican. They were white. Sometimes that's all the reason men need." Fox pulled his horse to a stop, pointing down into a narrow canyon. "See that?" Caleb looked where he indicated. At first he saw nothing but rocks and brush. Then movement caught his eye. 3 riders making their way through the canyon bottom, heading east. "Who are they?" "Victor's men. They rode out about 10 minutes after you left the ranch. My guess is they're heading to the railroad camp." "Why?" "That's what we're going to find out." Fox grinned, his teeth white against his dark skin. "You wanted to investigate? Well, let's investigate." They followed the riders at a distance, staying high on the canyon rim where the rocks and scrub provided cover. The terrain was brutal, loose shale that threatened to send the horses sliding with every step, thorny brush that grabbed at clothes and skin, heat that rose from the rocks like something alive and angry. But Caleb had grown up in this desert. He knew how to read the land, how to move with it instead of against it. And Fox moved like he was part of the landscape itself, his horse finding paths that seemed to materialize out of nothing. The riders below seemed unaware they were being followed. They moved at an easy pace, not hurrying, clearly confident in their route and purpose. After an hour, the canyon opened onto a wide plateau where the railroad was laying new track. Caleb could see the construction camp spread out below, tents and equipment scattered around the rail line like debris from a storm. Men swarmed over the site, driving spikes and hauling rails under the brutal noon sun. The 3 riders dismarged at a tent larger than the others and disappeared inside. "Now what?" Caleb asked. "Now we wait. See who they're meeting with and what gets discussed." They dismounted and settled into cover among the rocks, watching the camp below. The work continued its steady rhythm, the ring of hammers, the shouts of foremen, the grinding progress of iron and wood across the desert floor. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Finally, the 3 riders emerged from the tent, but they weren't alone. A 4th man walked with them, dressed in a suit that looked absurdly out of place in the construction camp. They stood talking for several minutes, too far away for their words to carry. Then the suited man handed one of the riders a thick envelope. "Payment," Fox murmured. "Has to be." "For what?" "For the land deal, maybe. Or for keeping quiet about whatever really happened to your uncle." Fox pulled out a battered spyglass and studied the scene below. "The man in the suit is Raymond Garrett. He's the chief purchasing agent for the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. Word is he's not particular about how he acquires land as long as he acquires it cheap." "You think he's involved in my uncle's death?" "I think your uncle had prime railroad land and refused to sell. I think he died suddenly, and that land got transferred to his widow for half its value. And I think Garrett just handed over a fat payment to Victor Hale's men." Fox lowered the spyglass. "You connect those dots however you want, but the picture looks pretty clear to me." Caleb watched the exchange below, his mind working through the implications. If the railroad was involved, this went deeper than just a greedy widow and her violent brother. This was conspiracy, fraud, corporate murder dressed up as natural causes. "I need proof," he said. "Something solid, something that will hold up in court." "Court?" Fox laughed without humor. "You think this is going to end in a courtroom? These people have already killed at least once, probably twice if you count the old sheriff. They own the current sheriff, the doctor, half the town council. You try to take this to court, you'll end up in the ground before the trial even starts." "Then what do you suggest?" Fox turned to look at him, his dark eyes serious. "I suggest we fight fire with fire. You want justice? Real justice? Then we need leverage. We need something these people want more than they want us dead." "Like what?" "Like proof of the fraud that they can't afford to have made public. Like witnesses who'll talk if something happens to us. Like making ourselves more valuable alive than dead." Fox rose from his cover, brushing dust from his clothes. "But first, we need to get inside that railroad office and see what paperwork they're hiding." "That's a good way to get shot." "Everything worth doing is a good way to get shot. Difference is whether you're shooting back." They made their way back to their horses and rode in a wide circle around the construction camp, approaching Red Mesa from the opposite direction to avoid suspicion. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon when they finally entered town, tired and coated with trail dust. Caleb headed for the livery, but Fox caught his arm. "Not yet. There's someone you need to meet first." "Who?" "Doctor's wife. Her name is Sarah Brennan, and she's been waiting for someone to ask her the right questions." Fox led him to a small house at the edge of town, painted white with blue trim and surrounded by a carefully tended garden that seemed to mock the desert trying to swallow it. He knocked twice, paused, then knocked 3 more times in rapid succession. The door opened a crack, revealing a thin woman in her 40s with graying hair and frightened eyes. "Miguel, I told you not to come here in daylight." "It's important, Sarah. This is Caleb Rourke, Silas's nephew." The woman's eyes widened. She glanced over her shoulder, then opened the door just wide enough for them to slip inside. The interior was spotlessly clean, smelling of soap and dried herbs. Medical books lined one wall, and an examination table dominated the front room. "Your husband's office?" Caleb asked. "Was. He moved it to a new building downtown 2 months ago. This is just storage now." Sarah Brennan wrung her hands, her voice barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't be here. If anyone sees—" "No one saw," Fox assured her. "Tell him what you told me, about the night Silas died." Sarah's face went even paler. "I can't. I promised David. He said if I ever spoke about it, we'd lose everything." Caleb moved closer, keeping his voice gentle. "Mrs. Brennan, my uncle was murdered. I think you know that. I think you've known it all along. And I think it's been eating at you ever since." Tears filled her eyes. "You don't understand. They threatened us. Threatened our children. My husband had debts, gambling debts to Victor Hale. They said if David didn't sign the death certificate without asking questions, they'd kill him and make it look like an accident. So he signed. What choice did we have? We have 3 children, 3 babies who need their father." Sarah wiped at her tears with shaking hands. "But David's not the same since. He drinks, can't sleep, sees your uncle's face every time he closes his eyes." "Was there an autopsy?" Caleb asked. "No, Evelyn refused one. Said she wanted her husband buried properly, not carved up like a side of beef." Sarah's voice dropped even lower. "But David saw the body before they prepared it. He saw things that didn't make sense." "What things?" "Bruising around the mouth and nose, slight discoloration of the skin, signs of struggle that wouldn't be present in a heart attack." She met Caleb's eyes. "David thinks your uncle was smothered, probably with a pillow while he slept. Quick, quiet. Hard to prove without a full examination." The words settled over Caleb like a shroud. His uncle, murdered in his own bed, smothered in the darkness by people he trusted. "Will your husband testify to this?" he asked. "Never. The fear is too deep. He'd rather live with the guilt than die with the truth." Sarah gripped Caleb's arm. "But I can testify. If you promise to protect my children, if you promise they won't suffer for my courage. I promise." "Promises are easy to make and hard to keep," Fox observed, "especially when you're outnumbered and outgunned." Then I'll even the odds. Caleb turned back to Sarah. I need you to write down everything your husband saw, everything he suspected. Sign it, date it, and hide it somewhere safe. If anything happens to me, that document needs to reach the territorial marshal. The marshal won't help. He's in the railroad's pocket. Then it needs to reach the newspapers, the Denver Post, the Santa Fe New Mexican, somewhere far enough away that the conspiracy can't reach. Caleb headed for the door. Can you do that? Yes, but Mr. Rourke, be careful. These people don't make mistakes. They're smart, organized, and they've already won once. Don't underestimate them. I won't, but they're going to learn something real soon. Caleb pulled open the door. They're not the only ones who can plan in the dark. As they left the Brennan house, the sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if not for what they represented. Night was coming, and in the darkness, dangerous men did their darkest work. What's your plan? Fox asked as they walked toward the livery. Same as before. Find proof, build a case, force them into the light where everyone can see what they really are. That's not a plan. That's a wish. Fox stopped walking. Listen, I respect what you're trying to do. I admire it even, but these people won't go quietly. They've invested too much, risked too much. They'll kill you before they let you expose them. Probably. So why are you doing this? You got your uncle's trust fund. You could ride out of here tomorrow, never look back, live comfortable the rest of your days. Caleb looked at the smaller man. Could you? Fox was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it was the first genuine smile Caleb had seen from him. No, I suppose I couldn't. Then I guess we're both fools. Fools with guns. That's got to count for something. Fox extended his hand. Partners? Caleb gripped it. Partners. They shook on it as the sun disappeared below the horizon, and Red Mesa transformed from a sleepy frontier town into something else. Something watchful. Something waiting. Somewhere in the darkness, Victor Hale was planning. Evelyn Rourke was calculating. And 6 hired killers were checking their weapons and preparing for the orders they knew would come. But Caleb Rourke wasn't the boy who'd left this town 3 years ago. He'd learned things in his wandering, hard things, dangerous things. He'd learned that sometimes justice didn't come from courtrooms and law books. Sometimes it came from the barrel of a gun. And sometimes that was the only language evil understood. The night settled over Red Mesa like a predator crouching in tall grass, patient and deadly. Caleb and Fox split up after leaving the Brennan house, agreeing to meet at the livery after dark. Fox had contacts to visit, information to gather, while Caleb needed time to think through their next move. He walked the streets alone, his boots echoing on the boardwalk, watching the town transform as lamps flickered to life in windows and the saloons began filling with men looking to drown their day in whiskey. He found himself standing outside the land office, a narrow building wedged between the bank and a dress shop. The windows were dark, but Caleb could see papers stacked on desks inside, files that might hold the answers he needed. The railroad contracts, the deed transfers, the evidence that would connect all the pieces. Thinking about breaking in? Caleb spun, his hand dropping to his gun. Attorney Morrison stepped out of the shadows, raising both hands in a placating gesture. Easy, Mr. Rourke, I'm not your enemy. That remains to be seen. Caleb's hand stayed near his weapon. You following me? Waiting for you. I heard about your visit to the ranch this morning. Word travels fast when Victor Hale's involved. Morrison glanced nervously up and down the street. We need to talk. Somewhere private. Your office? Too exposed. There's a stockroom behind the mercantile. The owner's a friend. He won't ask questions. Caleb followed the attorney through a series of back alleys, both men moving quietly through pools of shadow. Morrison produced a key and unlocked a rear door, leading them into a room that smelled of flour, coffee, and dried goods. A single lantern provided dim light. You're taking quite a risk, Caleb observed, meeting me like this. If Evelyn finds out, she'll do what she's done to everyone else who's gotten in her way. Morrison's voice was tight with fear and something else. Shame, maybe. But I can't stay silent anymore. Your uncle trusted me, made me executor of his estate because he believed I was an honest man. And what did I do? I rolled over the moment that woman smiled at me and her brother threatened me. What did they threaten you with? My daughter. She's 14. Lives with my sister in Denver. Victor said if I didn't cooperate, if I didn't process the will changes without question, they'd make sure something happened to her. Morrison's hands trembled. I'm a coward, Mr. Rourke. I should have fought, should have gone to the marshal, the governor, someone. But all I could think about was Emily, my little girl. Caleb felt a flash of sympathy despite himself. You did what you had to do to protect your family. That's not cowardice. Isn't it? Your uncle fought. Look where it got him. My uncle's dead because he fought alone, because he didn't know who to trust. Caleb moved closer. But I'm not alone anymore, and I'm asking you now. Will you help me? Will you testify to what you know? Morrison was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with his conscience. Finally, he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded document. This is a copy of your uncle's original will, the real one, from before he met Evelyn. In it, he leaves everything to you. The ranch, the water rights, the livestock, everything. He made it clear that if he remarried, his new wife would be provided for, but the core estate would remain with blood family. And the subsequent versions? Each one diminished your inheritance and expanded hers. The first change came a month after the wedding, the second 2 weeks before his death, the final version the day before he died. Morrison's voice dropped. I watched him sign that last one. His hand was shaking. His eyes were unfocused, and Evelyn stood right behind him, her hand on his shoulder, whispering in his ear. I think he was drugged. Can you prove it? No, but I can testify to what I saw. The coercion. The signs of impairment. A good lawyer could build a case for undue influence. Caleb took the document, studying it in the weak lamplight. His uncle's signature was strong and clear, nothing like the trembling scrawl Morrison described from the later versions. There's something else, Morrison continued. The railroad deal. The land your uncle supposedly sold them? I have documentation showing he never agreed to the sale. In fact, 3 weeks before his death, he sent a registered letter to Raymond Garrett explicitly refusing their offer. That letter is in the land office files. If you could get your hands on it, it would prove fraud. It would prove intent. Combined with Dr. Brennan's testimony about the suspicious death, Sarah Brennan's statement about the threats, and my testimony about the coerced will changes, you'd have enough to bring charges. Maybe even enough to interest a federal marshal. Caleb folded the document carefully and slipped it into his vest. Why are you doing this now? What changed? Morrison's expression hardened. This afternoon, Victor Hale came to my office. Told me you'd been asking questions. Told me to make sure those questions didn't get answered. Then he put his gun on my desk and said he'd be checking in with my sister soon, just to make sure Emily was doing well at school. The attorney's voice shook with suppressed rage. He threatened my daughter right to my face, smiled while he did it. And I realized something. Men like Victor Hale don't stop. They don't honor deals or respect boundaries. They take and take until there's nothing left, and then they find someone new to victimize. So you decided to fight. I decided to help you fight. I'm still too much of a coward to do it myself. Morrison moved toward the door. But I can give you the tools. The rest is up to you. After Morrison left, Caleb remained in the stockroom, thinking through the pieces of the puzzle. He now had testimony from Sarah Brennan about the murder method, testimony from Morrison about fraud and coercion, his uncle's letter warning of the conspiracy, and somewhere in the land office, a document that would prove Silas Rourke never agreed to sell his land. But testimony and documents meant nothing if he didn't survive long enough to present them. And Victor Hale wasn't going to wait patiently while Caleb built his case. The attack would come soon, probably tonight. Caleb extinguished the lantern and slipped out into the alley, his senses heightened, every shadow a potential threat. He made his way back to the livery through a roundabout route, doubling back twice to check for followers. Fox was already there, sitting in the hayloft with a rifle across his knees. Expecting trouble? Caleb asked as he climbed up. Trouble's already here. 3 of Victor's men have been circling this building for the past hour. They know you're staying here and they're working up the courage to make a move. Good. Let them come. That's a terrible plan. There are 3 of them and 2 of us, even odds at best. I don't plan on fighting fair. Caleb checked his revolvers, then pulled a box of ammunition from his saddlebag. How many ways in and out of this stable? Front door, back door, side window, hayloft door we're sitting next to. Can we secure them? The front and back doors have bars. The window's too small for a man to fit through. That just leaves this loft door. Fox gestured at the wide opening that allowed hay bales to be hoisted up from wagons below. Hard to defend, but it gives us a good shooting position. Then we make this our fortress. Let them come to us, fight on ground we choose. They spent the next 20 minutes preparing. Caleb moved his horse to a stall near the back door, ready for a quick escape if needed. Fox positioned spare weapons around the loft, a rifle, a shotgun, extra ammunition. They barred the front door and piled feed sacks near the back as a barricade. Then they waited. The night deepened. Outside, Red Mesa's sounds gradually faded as respectable people went to bed, and only the saloons remained active. Caleb could hear distant piano music, the occasional burst of laughter, the steady rhythm of a town that had no idea violence was gathering in its shadows. "Tell me something," Fox said quietly. "If we survive this, if we actually manage to bring these people down, what then? You planning to stay? Run the ranch?" "I don't know. Haven't thought that far ahead." "You should, because if we win, this town is going to need someone to rebuild what Evelyn and Victor destroyed. Someone people can trust." "I'm not that person. I'm good at breaking things, not building them." "Your uncle built an empire out of nothing. That's in your blood whether you want it or not." Fox shifted position, his eyes never leaving the darkness below. "He saw something in you worth leaving everything to. Maybe it's time you saw it too." Before Caleb could respond, movement caught his eye. 3 shadows detached from the buildings across the street, moving with purpose toward the livery. "Here they come," Fox whispered. The men approached cautiously, spreading out to cover multiple angles. Caleb recognized 2 of them from the ranch, hard-faced gunmen who wore their weapons like other men wore watches. The third was younger, maybe 20, with the nervous energy of someone trying to prove himself. They paused at the front door, testing it. Finding it barred, they moved around to the side. Caleb heard the scrape of the window being tested, then muffled curses when they found it too small. That left the back door. Fox aimed his rifle at the rear entrance while Caleb covered the loft opening. The tension stretched like wire pulled too tight, ready to snap at the slightest pressure. The back door exploded inward with a crash of splintering wood. The feed sack barricade slowed the intruders but didn't stop them. 2 men burst through, guns drawn, while the third covered them from outside. Fox fired first. His rifle cracked in the confined space, the muzzle flash briefly illuminating the loft. One of the intruders went down with a scream, clutching his leg. The other dove behind a stall, returning fire wildly. Bullets chewed through the wooden walls, sending splinters flying. Caleb stayed low, waiting for a clear shot. Below, the horses screamed and kicked in their stalls, terrified by the noise and violence. "You're trapped, Rourke!" one of the gunmen shouted. "Come down and we'll make it quick. Stay up there and we'll burn you out." "Try it," Caleb called back. "See what happens when you light a fire with us holding the high ground." The wounded man was still moaning, dragging himself toward the door. His partner fired 3 more shots toward the loft, more to keep them pinned than with any hope of hitting anything. Then Caleb heard a new sound. Footsteps on the roof. The third gunman had climbed up, probably using the water barrel and the rail fence. He was trying to reach the loft from above, come through the hatch that led to the roof. Fox heard it too. He swung his rifle up just as the roof hatch flew open. The young gunman dropped through, firing as he fell. One bullet passed so close to Caleb's head he felt the wind of its passage. Another punched through his hat, knocking it off. Caleb fired twice. The first shot caught the falling gunman in the shoulder. The second took him in the chest. He landed hard in the hay, his gun clattering away, blood spreading dark across his shirt. Below, the remaining unwounded gunman saw his chance. He broke from cover, sprinting for the loft ladder. Fox shot at him, but missed in the dim light. The man grabbed the ladder and started climbing, firing upward with one hand. Caleb rolled to the edge, looking down into the face of his attacker. For a frozen moment, they stared at each other across a distance of maybe 10 feet. The gunman's eyes widened in recognition or fear or both. Then Caleb shot him. The man fell backward off the ladder, hit the ground, and didn't move. Silence descended, broken only by the harsh breathing of the wounded man by the back door and the nervous stamping of the horses below. "That's 3 down," Fox said, already reloading his rifle. But they'll send more, probably the whole crew once they realize what happened. Caleb moved to check on the young gunman who'd come through the roof. The man was still alive, but fading fast, blood bubbling at his lips. His eyes found Caleb's, filled with pain and a terrible clarity. "Wasn't supposed to be like this," he gasped. "They said, easy money, just scare you off." "Who sent you?" Caleb demanded. "Was it Victor?" "Victor. Evelyn. Same thing. They own everything now. Everyone." The young man coughed, and more blood came. "Got a girl. In Alamogordo. Tell her I'm sorry." "What's her name?" But the light was already leaving his eyes. He died there in the hay, barely old enough to grow a proper beard, killed for money he'd never spend. Caleb felt the familiar weight of death settle over him. It never got easier, never got lighter. Every man he killed took a piece of him with them, until sometimes he wondered what would be left when it was all over. "We need to move," Fox said, breaking into his thoughts. "This isn't over. We hurt them tonight, but that just means they'll come harder next time." "Good. I want them angry. Angry people make mistakes." They climbed down from the loft carefully, weapons ready, in case the wounded man tried something, but he just lay there, clutching his shattered leg, his face gray with shock and pain. "You're going to leave me here?" he asked weakly. "We're going to send Dr. Brennan to patch you up," Caleb said. "Then you're going to tell the sheriff exactly what happened. How Victor Hale sent you to kill me. How you were just following orders." "I tell the sheriff that I'm a dead man." "You don't tell the sheriff. You're going to bleed to death before morning. Your choice." Caleb and Fox grabbed their essential gear and led their horses out through the ruined back door. Old Polk appeared from the shadows, his shotgun in hand, surveying the damage with a grim expression. "Heard the shooting. Figured I'd let you boys handle it." The old man looked at the bodies, the blood, the splintered wood. "This is going to get worse before it gets better, isn't it?" "Lot worse," Caleb confirmed. "I'm sorry about your livery. Building can be fixed. Men can't." Polk spat tobacco juice at the nearest corpse. "These boys chose their path. They just didn't expect it to end here. Send someone for Dr. Brennan. The one by the door might live if he gets help fast." "And the others?" "Send someone for the undertaker, too." They mounted and rode out of town, heading not for the open desert, but for the cluster of small ranches and homesteads that ringed Red Mesa. Fox led the way, seeming to know exactly where he was going. "There's a widow woman lives about 3 miles north," he explained. "Name's Martha Keene. Her husband died 2 years back, and she's been running their small spread with just her teenage son. Your uncle helped her out a few times when cattle thieves tried to run her off. She'll give us shelter." The Keene ranch was modest. A small adobe house, a barn that had seen better days, a few corrals holding maybe 24 head of cattle. A lamp burned in the window as they approached, and a figure appeared in the doorway with a rifle. "That's far enough. State your business." "It's Miguel Rivera, Mrs. Keene. I've got Caleb Rourke with me. We need a place to lay low for a few hours." The rifle lowered slightly. "Caleb Rourke? Silas's nephew?" "Yes, ma'am." "Well, what are you waiting for? Get in here before half of Red Mesa sees you." Martha Keene was in her 40s, weathered by sun and hardship, but still strong. She ushered them inside, her son Thomas, a lanky 17-year-old, taking their horses to the barn. The house was simple but clean, smelling of coffee and cornbread. "I heard you were back," Martha said, pouring them both coffee. "Heard about the trouble at the livery, too. News travels fast when guns start firing." "But how'd you hear about it already?" Caleb asked. "We just left. My boy was in town, saw the whole thing from the mercantile window. Rode home like the devil was chasing him to tell me." She settled into a chair across from them. "Your uncle was a good man, Mr. Rourke. Best man I knew. When the thieves came, when they said they'd burn me out if I didn't sell cheap and move on, Silas rode over with 10 of his best men and sat watch for 3 nights straight. Didn't ask for payment. Didn't want thanks. Just said it was the neighborly thing to do." "That sounds like him." "So when I heard he died sudden, and that woman he barely knew inherited everything, I knew something was wrong. But what could I do? I'm just a widow with a small spread and a boy too young to go up against men like Victor Hale." Her eyes hardened. "But you're not too young, and from what I hear, you're not afraid either." "I'm afraid," Caleb admitted. just not afraid enough to run. Good. Because this valley needs someone to stand up to those people. They've been squeezing the small ranchers for months now, buying up land for pennies and forcing people out. Your uncle's spread was the prize, but they're going after everyone else too. Fox leaned forward. Who else has sold out? The Garcias, the Johnsons, Old Man Patterson. Martha counted them on her fingers. All of them got the same treatment. Reasonable offer at first, then the price drops. Then accidents start happening. Fences cut, cattle stolen, barns catching fire. Eventually, everyone breaks. But not you, Caleb observed. Not yet. But it's coming. I can feel it. She refilled their coffee cups. You're planning something. I can see it in your eyes. How can I help? You already are, giving us shelter. That's more than most people would risk. I can do more. My son's good with a rifle, and I'm not bad myself. We've got horses, supplies, and we know this valley better than those hired guns ever will. Caleb looked at this woman who'd lost her husband but refused to lose her dignity. I won't put you and your son in danger. We're already in danger. Everyone in this valley is. The only question is whether we face it together or let them pick us off one by one. Martha's voice carried absolute conviction. Your uncle stood with me when I needed him. I'll stand with you now. It's what neighbors do. Thomas returned from the barn, his young face eager. The horses are fed and settled. What do you need me to do? Nothing, Caleb said firmly. You stay here. Protect your mother. I can fight. I know you can. But right now I need you alive more than I need you fighting. Caleb softened his tone. Your father's gone. Your mother needs you. Don't make her bury her son too. The boy's face fell, but he nodded reluctantly. Martha gave Caleb a grateful look. They stayed at the Keene Ranch through the darkest hours of night, taking turns keeping watch while the others rested. Caleb found himself unable to sleep, his mind churning through plans and possibilities. Victor would be furious about the failed attack. 3 men dead or wounded, nothing to show for it. He'd escalate, bring more force, maybe come himself next time. Good. The more personally involved Victor became, the more likely he was to make a mistake. As dawn approached, Fox shook Caleb awake from the light doze he'd finally fallen into. Time to move. We've got work to do. They thanked Martha, promised to send word when it was safe, and rode out into the pre-dawn darkness. Instead of heading toward Red Mesa, they circled wide, approaching the railroad construction camp from the east. What exactly are we doing? Caleb asked. Getting proof. That office I mentioned yesterday, the one where Garrett and his people keep their records. If we can find the original land contracts, the correspondence with your uncle, we'll have documentary evidence of the fraud. You mean breaking and entering? I prefer aggressive investigation. Fox grinned. Besides, they tried to kill you last night. I'd say that entitles you to a little creative justice. They left their horses a quarter-mile from the camp and approached on foot as the sky began to lighten. The construction site was quiet at this hour, most of the workers still asleep in their tents. Only a few early risers moved about, stoking fires and preparing breakfast. The office tent was larger than the others, situated slightly apart from the main camp. Fox produced a knife and made a small slit in the back of the tent, just large enough to slip through. Inside, papers covered every surface: maps, contracts, correspondence, payroll records, the organized chaos of a major construction project. Start looking, Fox whispered. Anything with your uncle's name or signature. They worked quickly and quietly, sorting through stacks of documents. Caleb found the contract for his uncle's land first, the one supposedly signed 3 days before Silas's death. The signature looked wrong, too neat, too controlled, nothing like the shaky scrawl Morrison had described. Found something, Fox murmured. He held up a letter addressed to Raymond Garrett, dated 3 weeks before Silas died. Caleb moved closer to read it. The letter was in his uncle's unmistakable handwriting, strong and clear. In it, Silas Rourke categorically refused to sell his land to the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. He cited the property's importance to his ranch's water access and its value to future generations. The final line was particularly damning. No amount of money will change my mind, and I strongly suggest you stop pressuring me to reconsider. This is it, Caleb breathed. This proves he never agreed to the sale. Keep looking. There might be more. They found more. Letters between Garrett and someone named E.M., likely Evelyn Mercer, using her maiden name. The correspondence outlined a plan to acquire the Rourke property through alternative means, and mentioned our mutual friend V.H., almost certainly Victor Hale. One letter, dated just 2 weeks before the wedding, was particularly incriminating. Garrett wrote, "If your plan succeeds and you gain control of the estate, we'll need the transfer executed immediately. My superiors are growing impatient, and there are questions about the methods we've employed elsewhere. This acquisition must appear completely legitimate." Evelyn's reply was brief and chilling. "Trust me, Silas Rourke will sign whatever I need him to sign, and if he becomes difficult, Victor knows how to handle obstacles." Caleb felt his blood run cold. This wasn't just fraud. This was premeditated murder, plotted months in advance, executed with cold precision. "We need copies of all this," he said. "Original evidence they can claim was stolen. But if we have copies, I know someone in town who can help. A clerk at the land office who owes me a favor. He's got access to a copying press." Fox was already gathering the most damaging documents. "We take these to him, get copies made, return the originals before anyone knows they're missing." They slipped out of the tent the same way they'd entered, carrying a folder stuffed with evidence. The sun was fully up now, painting the desert in harsh morning light. They'd made it maybe 50 yards when a shout went up behind them. "Hey, someone's been in the office!" Caleb and Fox ran. Behind them, men poured out of tents, some grabbing rifles, others giving chase on foot. A shot rang out, the bullet kicking up dust near Caleb's feet. They reached their horses and mounted in one fluid motion, spurring the animals into a gallop. More shots followed them, but they were moving fast now, putting distance between themselves and the camp. They rode hard for 20 minutes before Caleb looked back and saw no pursuit. The railroad men weren't horsemen. They'd given up the chase once it was clear their quarry was escaping. "That was close," Fox said, breathing hard. "Too close. Now they know someone's onto them." "Good. Let them panic. Panicked men make mistakes." They rode into Red Mesa from the south, arriving at mid-morning to find the town buzzing with activity. News of the shootout at the livery had spread, and people clustered in small groups on street corners, talking in urgent whispers. Sheriff Tom Wyatt stood on the boardwalk outside his office, arms crossed, watching Caleb and Fox ride in with cold eyes. He was a big man, gone soft around the middle, with a face that suggested he'd been handsome once but had let himself go to seed. "Mr. Rourke," he called out, "I need a word with you." Caleb dismounted slowly. "About what?" "About the 3 men shot last night, about the property damage, about you turning my town into a war zone." "Your town? Last I checked, Red Mesa didn't belong to you, Sheriff." Wyatt's face darkened. "Don't get smart with me, boy. I've got 2 corpses at the undertaker and a witness who says you started the shooting." "That witness is lying. Those men broke into the livery with intent to kill. I defended myself." "That's your version. I've got another version that says you ambushed them." "And whose version is that?" "Let me guess. Victor Hale's." The sheriff's hand moved toward his gun. "You're trying my patience." "And you're trying mine." Caleb stepped closer, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "Those men came to murder me on Victor Hale's orders. Everyone in this town knows it. The only question is whether you're going to do your job and investigate, or whether you're going to keep taking money from the people who killed my uncle." "That's quite an accusation." "It's not an accusation. It's a fact. And soon it's going to be a matter of public record." Caleb pulled one of the copied letters from his vest. "This is correspondence between the railroad and Evelyn Rourke plotting my uncle's murder. I've got more documents, more evidence, and more witnesses than you can threaten into silence." Wyatt's face went pale. "Where did you get that?" "Doesn't matter. What matters is that it exists. And if anything happens to me, copies of everything I've found go to the territorial marshal, the newspapers, and the federal government. Your corruption, Victor's violence, Evelyn's fraud, all of it exposed for the world to see." The sheriff was sweating now, despite the morning cool. "You're making a big mistake, Rourke." "The only mistake I made was waiting 3 years to come home. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving until justice is served." Caleb mounted his horse. "You might want to start thinking about which side you want to be on when this is all over." Because the people who killed my uncle are going down.
And everyone who helped them is going down too. He rode away, leaving Wyatt standing on the boardwalk, his hand still hovering near his gun, but his will clearly broken. Fox caught up with him at the edge of town. That was risky. You just put a target on your back. The target was already there. Now at least everyone knows I'm shooting back.
They headed for the land office clerk Fox had mentioned, a nervous young man named Billy who nearly fainted when he saw the documents they wanted copied. But he made the copies anyway, his hands shaking as he worked the press, creating duplicate after duplicate of the damning evidence. By sunset, they had everything they needed: proof of fraud, proof of conspiracy, proof of murder. All carefully documented, copied, and ready to be distributed to anyone who'd listen. Caleb stood in the fading light, looking toward the mountains where his uncle's ranch lay. Somewhere out there, Evelyn and Victor were plotting their next move. Somewhere, hired killers were being paid and positioned. Somewhere, the machinery of corruption was grinding forward, trying to bury the truth under enough violence and intimidation. But Caleb Rourke had grown up in this desert. He knew its moods and rhythms, its hiding places and killing grounds, and he was done hiding. Tomorrow, he was taking the fight to them. Tomorrow, the war would truly begin, and when it ended, only one side would walk away. The message arrived at dawn, delivered by a boy no older than 12 who rode up to Martha Keene's ranch like death itself was chasing him. Caleb had spent the night there again, he and Fox taking turns on watch while they planned their next move. They'd just finished a breakfast of coffee and hard biscuits when the boy came thundering into the yard, his horse lathered with sweat. "Mr. Rourke," the boy gasped, nearly falling from the saddle. "Mr. Rourke, you gotta come quick." Caleb caught him before he hit the ground. "Slow down. What happened?" "It's the town. Victor Hale and his men. They rode in about an hour ago. Broke into Attorney Morrison's office, tore the place apart." The boy's eyes were wide with terror. Then they went to the Brennan house, dragged the doctor into the street and beat him half to death. Mrs. Brennan tried to stop them, and Victor, he hit her, knocked her clean out. Fox was already moving toward the horses, his face dark with rage. "Where are they now?" "The silver dollar. Victor said to tell Mr. Rourke that if he wants to see anyone else get hurt, just keep hiding like a coward. Said he'll kill one person every hour until you face him." Caleb felt ice settle in his veins. This was it. The end game. Victor had abandoned all pretense of legitimacy and gone straight to terror. He was forcing Caleb's hand, and he'd chosen the perfect method. Make innocent people suffer until the target surrendered. "How many men does he have with him?" Caleb asked. "Maybe 10. All armed. They're drinking and laughing like it's a celebration." The boy wiped at his nose with a dirty sleeve. "My ma works at the hotel. She told me to find you, said you're the only one who can stop this." Martha emerged from the house, her rifle in hand and her face set with determination. "You're going after them." "I have to. He's hurting people because of me." "Then you'll need backup. Thomas!" She called for her son, who appeared from the barn. "Saddle the horses. We're riding into town." "Mrs. Keene, I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm offering. Those people in town are my friends, my neighbors. If Victor Hale thinks he can terrorize them without consequences, he needs to learn different." Martha checked her rifle's load with practiced efficiency. "Besides, you'll need witnesses. Whatever happens today, people need to see the truth of it." Caleb wanted to argue, wanted to protect this brave woman and her son from what was coming, but he saw the steel in her eyes and recognized it. This was the same strength that had allowed her to hold on to her ranch against thieves and intimidation. She wasn't asking permission. She was stating fact. They rode hard for Red Mesa, the 5 of them: Caleb, Fox, Martha, Thomas, and the boy who'd brought the message. The sun climbed higher as they rode, baking the desert floor, turning the air thick and hard to breathe. As they crested the final rise, Red Mesa spread out before them. From this distance it looked peaceful, almost serene, but Caleb could see the wrongness in the empty streets, the way people huddled in doorways rather than going about their business. Fear had settled over the town like a physical presence. "What's the plan?" Fox asked. "I challenge Victor, face to face. End this the old way." "A duel?" Martha's voice carried disbelief. "That's murder, not justice." "Justice is what happens when the law works. When the law's broken, sometimes all that's left is the gun. Caleb checked his revolvers one final time. Besides, Victor won't refuse. He's got too much pride, too much invested in his reputation as the fastest gun in the territory. And if he is faster, then Fox makes sure the evidence reaches the territorial marshal. Make sure everyone knows what they did. You're not going to die today, Fox said with absolute certainty. I've seen you shoot. I've seen how you move. Victor Hale's fast, but he's not faster than a man with nothing left to lose. They rode down into Red Mesa at a walk, taking their time, letting everyone see them coming. Windows filled with faces. Doors cracked open. The whole town was watching, waiting to see if someone would finally stand up to the terror that had gripped them. The Silver Dollar's doors were propped open, and Caleb could hear laughter and breaking glass from inside. He dismounted in front of the saloon, his boots hitting the dirt with a finality that felt like a door closing on the past. Martha, Thomas, and the messenger boy stayed with the horses. Fox moved to Caleb's left, his hand resting easy on his gun. Together they stepped onto the boardwalk. The laughter inside died the moment Caleb's shadow fell across the threshold. Victor Hale sat at a center table, surrounded by his men. Bottles of whiskey covered the table, and Victor held a glass in one hand. He looked up as Caleb entered, and a slow smile spread across his face. Well, well, the rabbit finally came out of his hole. Victor rose from his chair with exaggerated courtesy. I was beginning to think you didn't care what happened to the good people of Red Mesa. Where's Morrison? Where's Dr. Brennan? The attorney's in his office, contemplating the error of his ways. The doctor's at home, learning what happens to men who can't keep their mouths shut. Victor's smile widened. You want to check on them? Go ahead. But every minute you waste, I send my boys out to find someone else to educate. Maybe that pretty widow who's been helping you. Maybe her son. Lots of people in this town who need to learn their place. Caleb felt Fox tense beside him, but he kept his own voice level, cold. You made your point. You've got the whole town terrified. Congratulations. Now it's time to settle things between you and me. Is it? Victor poured himself another whiskey, the picture of casual confidence. See, I don't think you understand how this works. You don't get to make demands. You don't get to set terms. You're an inconvenience, nothing more. A loose end that needs tying off. Then tie it off. You and me, high noon, the old pueblo outside town. Caleb let the challenge hang in the air, watching it land. Unless you're afraid to face me without your hired guns backing you up. The room went silent. Every man present understood what Caleb was doing, calling Victor's courage into question in front of his crew. It was an insult that couldn't be ignored, a challenge that couldn't be declined without losing face. Victor's smile disappeared. His eyes went flat and cold. You think you can take me, boy? You think because you got lucky with a few drunks in a dark stable you can stand against me in daylight? I guess we'll find out. I've killed better men than you, faster men, men who'd been shooting since before you were born. Then one more shouldn't be any trouble. Caleb turned toward the door. High noon, the pueblo. Come alone or don't come at all. Your choice. He walked out before Victor could respond, before the moment could spiral into violence here and now. Fox followed, and together they mounted their horses and rode slowly down the street, feeling the weight of eyes on them from every window and doorway. He'll come, Fox said once they were out of earshot. Pride won't let him refuse. I'm counting on it. They rode to Morrison's office and found it exactly as the boy had described, ransacked. Papers scattered everywhere, furniture overturned, books torn from shelves. Morrison himself sat in the corner, his face bruised and swollen, blood crusted under his nose. He looked up as they entered, and something like hope flickered in his eyes. You're going to fight him. High noon, the pueblo. He'll kill you. Marcus Kane was supposed to arrive yesterday, the bounty hunter Evelyn hired. If he's here, if he's watching, let him watch. Let all of them watch. Caleb helped Morrison to his feet. I need you to do something for me. Take those documents we copied, all the evidence. If I don't come back from this, you make sure they reach the right people. And if you do come back, then we finish this. We expose Evelyn, we bring charges, and we take back everything they stole. Caleb gripped the attorney's shoulder. But first, I have to survive the next few hours. They left Morrison and rode to the Brennan house. Sarah answered the door, her face pale, a bruise darkening her left cheek. Inside, Dr. Brennan lay on a bed, barely conscious, his injuries severe but not life-threatening. "He tried to protect me," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Victor hit him with a rifle butt, kept hitting him even after he was down." "I'm going to make this right," Caleb promised. "I'm going to end it." "By dying in a gunfight? How does that help anyone?" "I don't plan on dying." Sarah looked at him with a mixture of hope and despair. "Men never do, but they die anyway." Caleb had no answer for that. He left her with promises he might not be able to keep and rode toward the pueblo, with Fox beside him, and the sun climbing toward its zenith. The old pueblo sat 3 miles outside town, a collection of crumbling adobe structures that had been abandoned years ago when the people who built it either died or moved on. It was a place of ghosts and silence, sheltered by red rock cliffs that caught and held the desert heat. They arrived an hour before noon. Caleb dismounted and walked the ground, learning its contours, understanding its angles. The main plaza was maybe 50 yards across, surrounded by the broken walls of ancient dwellings. Good sight lines. Nowhere to hide. Exactly what he needed. Fox positioned himself on a rooftop with his rifle, not to interfere but to watch. If Victor brought his men despite the agreement, Fox would make sure they didn't get involved. Martha and Thomas arrived shortly after, having followed despite Caleb's protests. They took positions at the edge of the pueblo, witnesses to whatever would unfold. Then there was nothing to do but wait. The sun reached its peak, burning down from a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Heat shimmered off the ground in waves, distorting distances, playing tricks with the eyes. Caleb stood in the center of the plaza, his shadow pooled around his feet like spilled ink. He heard them before he saw them. Horses. Multiple horses. His hand dropped to his gun, muscles tensing. But when the riders appeared, he saw that Victor had come as promised, alone on his horse. The others, maybe 8 of them, stopped at the edge of the pueblo. Victor dismounted and walked into the plaza. He wore black despite the heat, his guns polished to a mirror shine, his hat pulled low against the sun. He looked like death incarnate, and he moved with the confidence of a man who'd never lost. "I'm surprised you showed," Victor called out. "Thought maybe you'd come to your senses and run. Running's not in my nature. Neither is dying, I bet. But everyone does it eventually." Victor stopped about 40 paces away, his hands hanging loose at his sides. "Last chance to walk away, Rourke. Get on your horse, ride out of the territory, and never come back. I'll even let you keep the trust fund. And let you get away with murdering my uncle? Not a chance. Your uncle was a fool, refused a fair deal, forced our hand. What happened to him was unfortunate but necessary." Well, Victor's voice carried no remorse, no guilt. "You're about to learn the same lesson. When you fight the inevitable, you lose. The only thing inevitable here is justice. One way or another, you're paying for what you did." Big words from a man about to die. They faced each other across the dusty plaza, 2 men separated by blood and choice, connected by violence about to be unleashed. Caleb could feel the moment stretching, pulling taut like a wire about to snap. The desert held its breath. Somewhere a hawk cried, its voice sharp and lonely. Victor's hand moved. Caleb drew. The sequence happened too fast for conscious thought, too fast for anything but muscle memory and instinct. His hand found the gun, pulled it free, thumb cocking the hammer as the barrel came up. He fired without seeming to aim, trusting his body to know what his mind couldn't calculate. 2 shots thundered across the plaza, so close together they almost sounded like one. Caleb felt something tug at his vest, hot and urgent. Victor's bullet, passing through fabric but missing flesh by a finger's width. His own bullet struck true. Victor staggered backward, his gun falling from his hand. He looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest, then up at Caleb, his expression one of complete disbelief. "That's not possible," he whispered. "I'm faster. I'm always faster." "You were," Caleb agreed quietly. "But speed doesn't matter if your heart's not in it. You were killing for money. I'm fighting for family." Victor's legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees, swaying. His eyes found the men who'd ridden with him, standing frozen at the pueblo's edge. "Help me," he gasped. "Help me, you cowards!" None of them moved. They'd been loyal to Victor's money and his reputation, not to the man himself. And a dying man couldn't pay. couldn't protect, couldn't do anything but bleed into the dust. Victor fell forward, caught himself on his hands, coughed up blood. "Evelyn," he whispered, tell her it's not over. Tell her Marcus Kane is already here. Tell her—" He died before finishing the sentence, collapsing into the dirt that had claimed so many men before him. Caleb stood over the body, his gun still smoking, his heart hammering against his ribs. He felt no triumph, no satisfaction, just a hollow emptiness where the rage had been, and the certain knowledge that this wasn't finished yet. Victor's men watched from the periphery, uncertain what to do now that their leader was dead. Fox appeared on the rooftop, his rifle pointed in their direction. "Your boss is dead," Caleb called out to them. "Your paychecks just stopped coming, so here's what's going to happen. You're going to ride out of Red Mesa and keep riding. You're going to find honest work somewhere far from here. And if I ever see any of you again, I'll assume you're here to kill me and act accordingly. Understood?" The men exchanged glances. One by one, they mounted their horses. One by one, they rode away, leaving Victor's body to cool in the desert sun. Martha and Thomas came out of hiding, their faces pale but resolute. "What about Evelyn?" Martha asked. "She's next. But first we need to deal with this Marcus Kane." Caleb reloaded his revolver, his hand steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through him. "If he's the bounty hunter I've heard about, he's not going to give up just because Victor's dead. He'll have been paid in advance, and men like him don't leave jobs unfinished." "Then we find him first," Fox said, climbing down from his perch. "Take the fight to him before he's ready." They left the pueblo with the sun beginning its descent toward the western horizon. Behind them, Victor Hale lay dead in the dust, his blood soaking into the same ground where ancient peoples had lived and died and been forgotten by time. Red Mesa came into view as they rode, and Caleb could see change already taking hold. People were emerging from buildings, congregating in the street, talking in voices that carried a new edge of hope. News of Victor's death had spread faster than wildfire, and with it, the first stirrings of rebellion against Evelyn's control. They rode straight to the Silver Dollar, where the bartender met them at the door. "Mrs. Rourke came through about 20 minutes ago," he said. "Took her brother's body, said she was heading back to the ranch. But before she left, she met with a man in black, tall, cold eyes, carried his guns cross-draw style." "Marcus Kane," Fox murmured. "He left right after her. Headed north instead of west, though, like he was circling around to come at the ranch from a different direction." The bartender wiped his hands on his apron. "Mr. Rourke, I don't know what you're planning, but that man, he's different from the others. Feels wrong. Dangerous in a way that has nothing to do with how fast he draws." Caleb understood. He'd met men like that before. Men who killed with the same emotion other people used to eat breakfast. Men who saw death as just another job, another transaction. "How much is Evelyn paying him?" Caleb asked. "Word is $500. Half up front, half when you're dead." $500. A fortune for most people. For a man like Marcus Kane, probably just another payday. Caleb looked at Fox, at Martha, at young Thomas who'd insisted on staying despite the danger. "I need to face him alone." "That's suicide," Martha protested. "Maybe, but if Kane's at the ranch, Evelyn's there too, and I need her alive to face justice. If we all go charging in, someone's liable to die who doesn't deserve it." Caleb dismounted, his decision made. "Fox, I need you to ride to the territorial marshal's office. Take all the evidence we gathered. Make sure he knows what's happened here, what we found. That's 3 days' ride. I know, but if Kane kills me, if something goes wrong, that evidence is the only thing that will bring Evelyn down. Someone has to make sure it reaches the right people." Fox clearly wanted to argue, but he saw the logic. Finally, he nodded. "Don't die while I'm gone." "I'll do my best." Martha gripped Caleb's arm. "That woman has already taken your uncle from you. Don't let her take you too." "She won't. I've got too much left to do." Caleb squeezed her hand, then mounted his horse. "When this is over, when it's all settled, I'm going to need help rebuilding the ranch, if you're interested in the job." Martha's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "I'd be honored." Caleb rode out of Red Mesa for what he knew might be the last time. The sun was sinking fast now, painting the desert in shades of amber and blood. By the time he reached his uncle's ranch, night would have fallen. And in that darkness, he'd face whatever waited for him. The ride seemed both too long and too short. Part of him wanted to race ahead, get it over with. Another part wanted to slow down, savor these last moments of certainty before everything became chaos and chance. He thought about his uncle, alone in that house with people plotting his death. Had Silas known at the end? Had he understood that the woman he'd trusted, maybe even loved, was going to kill him? Or had he died in his sleep, never knowing that the pillow being pressed against his face belonged to his own wife? Caleb hoped it was the latter. His uncle deserved that much mercy, at least. The ranch appeared as full darkness fell, lights burning in the windows of the main house. Caleb stopped on the ridge overlooking the property, studying it like a battlefield. He could see movement inside the house, shadows passing behind curtains. 2 figures, maybe 3. He left his horse tied in a stand of cottonwoods and approached on foot, moving quiet through the darkness. The ranch yard was eerily silent. No guards, no dogs, nothing but the whisper of wind through the buildings. Too quiet. It was a trap. Had to be. But knowing didn't change what Caleb had to do. He moved toward the house, his hands ready, his senses screaming warnings that his courage overruled. He was 10 feet from the veranda when a voice stopped him cold. "That's far enough, Mr. Rourke." The man stepped out of the shadows, and Caleb knew immediately this was Marcus Kane. He was tall, lean as a whip, dressed all in black. His face was unremarkable, the kind of face you'd forget 5 minutes after seeing it. But his eyes were empty as winter graves. "You've caused Mrs. Rourke considerable trouble," Kane said, his voice flat and emotionless. "She hired me to resolve that trouble, nothing personal, just business." "It's personal to me." "I'm sure it is, but that doesn't change the outcome." Kane's hands hovered near his guns. "I've been doing this for 15 years. I've never failed to complete a contract. I don't plan to start now. There's a first time for everything." "True, but not today." Kane shifted his weight slightly, a subtle movement that put him in perfect position. "Any last words?" "I try to give men that courtesy." Caleb thought about all the things he could say. About justice. About his uncle. About the corrupt system that allowed men like Kane to exist, but words felt hollow in the face of what was about to happen. "Just one thing," Caleb said quietly. "The woman who hired you, she's a murderer, killed her own husband for money. Whatever she's paying you, it's blood money. You might want to think about that before you pull the trigger." "I have thought about it. Spent about 3 seconds on the question. Then I took her money anyway." Kane's expression didn't change. "Morality's for men who can afford it. I never could." "Then I'm sorry for you." "Don't be. I sleep fine at night." The moment stretched between them, taut as a drawn bow. Caleb could see the calculation in Kane's empty eyes, the professional assessment of angles and distance and speed. Then Kane drew. But this time, Caleb was ready. This time, he'd been expecting it. His hand moved even as Kane's cleared leather, both men firing in the same heartbeat. The night exploded with muzzle flashes and thunder. Caleb felt something punch his shoulder, spinning him halfway around. Pain bloomed hot and immediate, but his gun arm stayed steady. He fired again. And again, walking his shots into the center of mass like he'd been taught years ago. Kane staggered. His gun wavered. He fired once more, the bullet going wide, then his legs buckled. He went down hard, his guns falling from nerveless fingers. Caleb approached cautiously, his own weapon still trained on the fallen bounty hunter. Blood spread dark across Kane's chest, soaking his black shirt even darker. "How?" Kane whispered, genuine confusion in his dying eyes. "I'm faster. I'm always faster." "Maybe you are," Caleb said, pressing his hand against his own wounded shoulder. "But I was expecting you, and I've been practicing dying for the past 3 days. Turns out I'm not very good at it." Kane coughed, blood flecking his lips. "Fair enough. Tell me, did I at least wound you?" "Shoulder. I'll live." "Pity." Kane's eyes lost focus. "Would have liked to finish the job." He died with that regret, his final breath rattling out into the desert night. Caleb stood over him, swaying slightly from pain and blood loss. The wound in his shoulder burned like fire, but it wasn't fatal. He'd been lucky. Incredibly, impossibly lucky. The front door of the ranch house opened. Evelyn Rourke stood framed in the light, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders, her green eyes reflecting the lamplight behind her. She looked at Kane's body, at Caleb standing wounded but alive, and her expression cycled through surprise, fear, and finally resignation. "It's over, isn't it?" she said softly. "It's over." Caleb climbed the steps, his gun trained on her. "Your brother's dead. Your hired killer's dead. And I've got enough evidence to hang you 10 times over. I suppose you want me to beg for mercy. I want you to tell me why. Why my uncle? What did he ever do to you except love you?" Evelyn's laugh was bitter. "Love? Your uncle didn't love me. He loved his dead wife. He loved his empire. He loved the memory of the brother he lost. I was just something to fill the empty space, a decoration, a convenience. That doesn't justify murder, doesn't it? I was tired of being poor, tired of being overlooked, tired of men using me and discarding me like I was nothing." She met his eyes, defiant even in defeat. "Your uncle had everything. I had nothing. So I took what I needed to survive. I'd do it again." "Then you'll have plenty of time to think about that in prison." Caleb bound her hands with rope from the barn, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. By the time he finished, riders were approaching, Fox returning with the territorial marshal and 3 deputies. Word had traveled fast, and justice, for once, was arriving before it was too late. Marshal Howard was a gray-haired man with hard eyes and a reputation for honesty that had survived 30 years on the frontier. He listened to Caleb's story, examined the evidence Fox had brought, and arrested Caleb Rourke without ceremony. "You did good work here, son," the marshal said as his deputies loaded Evelyn into a wagon for the long trip to the territorial prison. "Your uncle would be proud." Caleb watched them leave, taking with them the woman who'd destroyed so many lives in her pursuit of wealth and status. He felt no triumph, just exhaustion and the bone-deep weariness that comes when violence finally ends. Fox helped him back into the ranch house, where Dr. Brennan, bruised but functional, cleaned and stitched the shoulder wound. As he worked, people from town began arriving. Morrison, Martha, Sarah Brennan, the bartender from the Silver Dollar. One by one, they came to see if the rumors were true. If the nightmare was really over, if Red Mesa was finally free, and standing there in his uncle's house, surrounded by people who'd found their courage again, Caleb Rourke understood that his wandering days were finished. This was home. This had always been home. He just needed to fight for it to know it was worth keeping. Dawn broke over the ranch with a clarity that felt almost sacred, the kind of light that makes everything sharp and clean and new. Caleb woke in his uncle's bed, his bed now, he supposed, with his shoulder throbbing beneath Dr. Brennan's careful bandaging. The events of the previous night felt distant, almost dreamlike, but the pain was real enough to anchor him in the present. He rose slowly, testing his limits, and walked to the window that overlooked the ranch yard. Down below, Fox was already up, tending to the horses with the easy competence of a man who'd spent his life around animals. Beyond the corrals, the desert stretched endlessly, unchanged by human violence, indifferent to human triumph or tragedy. The smell of coffee drew him downstairs, where he found Martha Keene in the kitchen, moving through his uncle's space like she belonged there. "You should still be resting," she said without turning around, somehow sensing his presence. "I've rested enough. Besides, there's work to do." "There's always work to do on a ranch. That's why you hire good people and let them do it." She poured him coffee, studying his face. "You look like hell." "I feel worse, but I'm alive, which is more than Victor or Kane can say." Martha's expression softened. "What you did yesterday, standing up to them, facing them down, people won't forget that. You gave this town back its backbone." "I just did what needed doing." "That's what heroes always say. Doesn't make it less true." She handed him the coffee, steam rising from the cup. "The question now is what comes next. You've got your uncle's ranch back. You've got justice for his murder. You've exposed the corruption. So what does Caleb Rourke do when the shooting stops?" It was a question he'd been avoiding, but Martha had a way of cutting straight through to the heart of things. Caleb sipped the bitter coffee and considered his answer. "Honestly, I don't know. 3 days ago I was drifting, no home, no purpose, just moving from one town to the next, trying to outrun a past that followed me anyway." He looked around the kitchen, seeing his aunt's touch in the curtains, his uncle's presence in the worn table. Now I'm standing in a house full of ghosts, responsible for land I never wanted, and a legacy I'm not sure I can live up to. Your uncle didn't need you to live up to anything. He just needed you to come home. And you did. Martha moved to the window, looking out at the ranch. This place needs someone who'll fight for it, someone who understands that land isn't just property. It's trust passed from one generation to the next. You proved you're that someone. Before Caleb could respond, Fox appeared in the doorway, his expression urgent. We've got company. Riders coming in from the east. Looks like Sheriff Wyatt and about a dozen townspeople. Caleb set down his coffee and followed Fox outside, his hand instinctively checking his gun. But as the riders came into focus, he saw they weren't coming for a fight. They were coming for a reckoning. Sheriff Wyatt dismounted first, his face haggard, his badge catching the morning light. Behind him, the townspeople gathered, shopkeepers, ranch hands, the Reverend, people whose faces Caleb recognized from his childhood. Mr. Rourke, Wyatt began, his voice rough. I've come to tender my resignation and my apology. The words hung in the air, unexpected and raw. I knew what was happening, Wyatt continued. Knew about the threats, the intimidation, the way Victor and Evelyn were squeezing this town. And I did nothing. Worse than nothing. I helped them. Took their money, looked the other way, told myself I was just trying to survive. He pulled the badge from his vest and held it out. I don't deserve to wear this. And I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I wanted you to know that what you did, the courage you showed, it reminded me what a lawman's supposed to be. Caleb looked at the badge, tarnished and dented from years of use. What will you do if you're not sheriff? I don't know. Find honest work somewhere. Try to live with my shame. Wyatt's voice cracked. I failed this town. I failed your uncle. I failed myself. You did, Caleb agreed and saw Wyatt flinch. But you're also standing here, owning it. That takes a different kind of courage. He didn't take the badge. Red Mesa still needs a sheriff. Someone who knows the town, knows its people. Someone who's learned what happens when good men stay silent. Wyatt looked up sharply. You can't be serious. I'm dead serious. You made mistakes. You've got a chance to fix them. The question is whether you're willing to do the work. The former sheriff stared at the badge in his hand, then at Caleb, tears gleaming in his eyes. I won't let you down. I swear it. See that you don't. Because if I hear about you taking bribes or looking the other way ever again, I'll come for you myself. And I won't be as forgiving the second time. Wyatt nodded, pinned the badge back on his vest with shaking hands, and rode back toward town with the bearing of a man who'd been given something he didn't deserve but intended to earn. After the riders left, Attorney Morrison arrived in a dusty buggy, his face still showing bruises from Victor's beating. He carried a leather satchel stuffed with documents. Mr. Rourke, we need to discuss the estate, he said, spreading papers across the kitchen table. With Evelyn's arrest and the evidence of fraud, the territorial court has invalidated all the will changes made in the 6 months before your uncle's death. That means the original will stands. Everything. The ranch, the water rights, the livestock, the investments. It all comes to you. Caleb looked at the papers, seeing his uncle's signature repeated across deed after deed. It was overwhelming. Not just the wealth, but the responsibility. Thousands of acres, hundreds of head of cattle, contracts with the railroad that needed renegotiating, water rights that affected every small rancher in the valley. There's more, Morrison continued. The railroad wants to settle. They're offering fair market value for the land they need, plus damages for their role in the conspiracy. It's a substantial sum. How substantial? Enough to modernize the entire operation. Drill new wells, build better irrigation, expand the herd. Morrison hesitated. Or enough to sell out completely and live very comfortably for the rest of your life. Fox, who'd been listening from the doorway, spoke up. What are you going to do? Caleb thought about his uncle building this empire from nothing. Thought about his father, working alongside Silas, dreaming of what the ranch could become. Thought about all the people who depended on this land. The small ranchers who needed the water rights. The town that needed the economic stability. The future generations who'd inherit whatever he built or destroyed here. I'm going to rebuild, he said finally. Not the way it was, but better. Fair contracts with the railroad, fair prices for the water.
A ranch that lifts up the whole valley instead of just one family. Morrison smiled. Your uncle would have liked that.
Over the following weeks, Red Mesa transformed. With Evelyn and her conspirators gone, the fear that had gripped the town began to lift like morning fog burning off under the sun. Small ranchers who'd been intimidated into selling cheap suddenly found themselves with legal recourse. The railroad, facing federal prosecution for fraud, agreed to renegotiate every contract they'd obtained through coercion. Caleb threw himself into the work, his wounded shoulder healing slowly as he rode the property boundaries, met with neighbors, rebuilt relationships his uncle's death had fractured. Fox became his right hand, managing the day-to-day operations while Caleb handled the bigger picture. Martha and Thomas moved into one of the ranch's outlying houses, and Martha proved invaluable in ways Caleb hadn't anticipated. She knew ranching inside and out, knew which hands could be trusted and which couldn't, knew the rhythms of the land and the cattle. Your uncle ran this place through force of will and force of personality, she told Caleb one evening as they reviewed the books. But that kind of leadership dies with the man. You're building something different, something that can survive beyond you. If I survive long enough to finish building it, you will. The dangerous part's over. But she was wrong about that. 3 weeks after Evelyn's arrest, a lawyer from Denver arrived bearing news that made Caleb's blood run cold. Evelyn Rourke had escaped during transport to the territorial prison. 2 guards were dead, and she'd vanished into the wilderness with help from someone who knew exactly when and where to strike. Do they have any leads? Caleb asked. The lawyer shook his head. She could be anywhere, Mexico, California, hiding in plain sight in some mining camp. The marshal's office is investigating, but he trailed off, the implication clear. Evelyn was gone, and finding her would be like finding a specific grain of sand in the desert. That night, Caleb sat on the veranda watching the stars emerge one by one. Fox joined him, carrying 2 glasses of whiskey. She's not coming back, Fox said, reading Caleb's thoughts. She's too smart for that. She knows if she shows her face anywhere near here, you'll kill her. Maybe. But knowing she's out there unpunished, she is being punished. She's lost everything. The ranch, the money, her brother, her future. She'll spend the rest of her life running, looking over her shoulder, never able to settle or build or trust anyone. Fox handed Caleb one of the glasses. That's a kind of prison too. Caleb wanted to believe it, but the need for justice burned like acid in his gut. Evelyn had murdered his uncle in cold blood, had tried to steal everything Silas had built, and now she was free while his uncle lay in the ground. A week later, resolution came from an unexpected direction. Caleb was working in the north pasture, repairing fence line with Fox and 2 hired hands, when he saw a rider approaching. The figure was small, hunched in the saddle, moving slowly like someone at the end of a long journey. As the rider drew closer, Caleb recognized the expensive riding clothes, now dusty and torn. The auburn hair, now tangled and dull. The green eyes, now desperate and haunted. Evelyn. She dismounted 20 feet away, her hands empty, her face gaunt. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. I didn't come to fight, she said, her voice hoarse. I came to surrender. Fox's hand moved to his gun, but Caleb stopped him with a gesture. Why? Because I'm tired of running. Because every town I reached, someone recognized me from wanted posters. Because I realized I'd traded one prison for another, and at least in a real prison, I won't have to keep looking behind me. She swayed slightly, and Caleb realized she was near collapse. Whatever help she'd received escaping had clearly abandoned her afterward. There's something else, Evelyn continued. Something I need to tell you before they hang me. She met his eyes. Your uncle knew. At the very end, he knew what we'd done. Victor held the pillow, but I was there. I watched. And in those final moments, when he looked at me, I saw understanding in his eyes. And forgiveness. You're lying. I'm not. Your uncle was a better man than I deserved. He loved me, even knowing what I was. And with his last breath, he whispered, I'm sorry. Not sorry for himself, sorry for me, for what I'd become. Tears streaked through the dust on her face. I've carried that with me every day since. That moment when a dying man showed me more grace than I'd shown anyone in my entire life. Caleb felt something shift inside him. Not forgiveness. He'd never forgive her for what she'd done. But understanding, perhaps. understanding that evil often came wrapped in desperation and loneliness and 1,000 small compromises that eventually led somewhere monstrous. Fox, ride to town. Tell Sheriff Wyatt we have his prisoner. While they waited for the sheriff, Caleb gave Evelyn water and shade. She sat on the ground, broken and defeated, all her beauty and cunning reduced to this, a woman facing the consequences of her choices. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I am sorry. Not sorry enough to undo what I did, but sorry nonetheless. Caleb had no answer for that. Sorry didn't bring his uncle back. Sorry didn't repair the damage she'd caused. Sorry was just a word that made the speaker feel better about the unforgivable. Sheriff Wyatt arrived within the hour, bringing 2 deputies. He placed Evelyn in irons without ceremony, and she went quietly, all the fight gone out of her. She'll stand trial in 3 weeks, Wyatt told Caleb. You'll need to testify. I'll be there. Caleb watched them ride away, taking with them the last piece of the conspiracy that had destroyed his uncle. When they were gone, Fox clapped him on the shoulder. The good one. It's really over now. Yeah, I think it is. The trial came and went with brutal efficiency. Evelyn pleaded guilty to murder, fraud, and conspiracy, perhaps hoping for mercy, or perhaps simply exhausted from fighting. The judge sentenced her to life in the territorial prison, and she was taken away to serve out her days in a cell not much bigger than a coffin. Caleb attended the sentencing but felt no satisfaction. Justice had been served, but it was cold comfort. His uncle was still dead. The months of suffering and fear couldn't be undone. All they could do was move forward and try to build something better from the ashes. The seasons turned. Summer's brutal heat gave way to autumn's gentler warmth. The ranch prospered under Caleb's management, and Red Mesa grew stronger as the small ranchers regained their footing. The railroad paid its settlements, and Caleb used the money to drill new wells, build a school, and establish a fund for widows and orphans, insurance against the kind of predatory behavior that had nearly destroyed the valley. On a cool October morning, Caleb stood at his uncle's grave, the headstone finally installed after months of delay. It was simple granite, engraved with Silas Rourke's name and the dates of his birth and death. Below that, Caleb had added a line. He built with his hands and loved with his whole heart. I kept my promise, Caleb said to the silent stone. I came back. I fought. I won. And I'm staying. The wind whispered through the cemetery, rustling the leaves of the cottonwoods that shaded the graves. Somewhere a meadowlark sang, its voice bright and clear. Fox approached from the cemetery gate, his hat in his hands. The hands are asking if you want to go ahead with the new bunkhouse. Tell them yes. And tell Martinez I want him to oversee it. He's earned the promotion. You're getting good at this boss thing. I'm learning, slowly. Caleb turned away from his uncle's grave, looking toward the ranch visible in the valley below. My uncle spent 30 years building this place. I figure I've got at least that long to make it what he always dreamed it could be. That's a long time. You planning on doing it alone? Caleb thought about Martha, whose quiet competence had become indispensable. Thought about the friendship he'd built with Fox, forged in violence but sustained by mutual respect. Thought about the community forming around the ranch, people drawn together by shared hardship and shared hope. No, he said. I don't think I am. They walked back to their horses, leaving the dead to their rest. As they rode down from the cemetery, Caleb took one last look back at his uncle's grave, at the place where Silas Rourke had been laid to rest beside the wife he'd never stopped loving. The land stretched out in all directions, vast and unforgiving and beautiful in its harsh way. This was home. This had always been home, even when Caleb was running from it. And now he understood what his uncle had tried to teach him all those years ago, that home wasn't just a place, it was a promise, a commitment to something larger than yourself, a willingness to fight for what mattered, even when the cost was high. 6 months after Evelyn's trial, Red Mesa held its first town meeting in the new community hall Caleb had funded. The place was packed, ranchers, shopkeepers, families who'd come from miles around to have their say in the valley's future. Caleb stood at the front, uncomfortable with the attention, but recognizing its necessity. These people needed to see him, needed to know he was committed to staying and building. My uncle believed this valley could be more than just a collection of isolated ranches. he began, his voice carrying to the back of the room. He believed we were stronger together than apart. I aimed to prove him right. He laid out his vision, shared water rights managed fairly, a cooperative approach to dealing with the railroad, a school that would serve every family, not just the wealthy, a medical clinic staffed by Dr. Brennan, paid for by contributions from the larger ranches. This won't be easy, Caleb continued. Building something better never is, but we've proven we can fight when we have to. Now let's prove we can build when the fighting's done. The vote was unanimous, and as the meeting broke up and people moved to the refreshment tables Martha had organized, Caleb felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Hope. A year to the day after his return to Red Mesa, Caleb stood on the ranch house veranda watching the sun set over land that had been bought with blood and held through courage. The ranch had doubled its herd. The new irrigation system was operational. The community school had opened with 30 students, including Thomas Keene, who was proving to be a natural scholar. Fox joined him, as he often did these evenings, bringing news from town. Sheriff Wyatt broke up a fight at the Silver Dollar, handled it without firing a shot or breaking any heads. People are saying he's turned into a real lawman. People can change when they want to badly enough. Speaking of change, Martha's asking when you're going to make her ranch manager official instead of just letting her run things without the title. Caleb smiled. Tell her next week. I'm having the papers drawn up. She's earned it 10 times over. They stood in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. Closer, a horse whinnied. The sounds of a working ranch, alive and thriving. You ever think about what would have happened if you'd stayed away? Fox asked. If you'd ignored that telegram and just kept drifting? Sometimes. But it doesn't matter. I came back. And everything that followed, the violence, the justice, the rebuilding, it all stems from that one choice. No regrets? Caleb thought about Victor and Cain, dead because they'd chosen violence. Thought about Evelyn, alive but imprisoned. Thought about his own wounded shoulder that still ached when the weather changed. Thought about the nightmares that sometimes woke him in the dark hours before dawn. Plenty of regrets, he admitted. But staying isn't one of them. The desert night settled around them, vast and ancient and indifferent to human concerns. But within that indifference, people had carved out lives, built communities, created meaning from dust and determination. Caleb Rourke had left this land as a boy running from his past. He'd returned as a man carrying his ghosts, and in the crucible of violence and justice, he'd finally become what his uncle always knew he could be. Not a gunfighter, not a drifter, not a lonely rider disappearing into the sunset, a builder, a leader, a man worthy of the legacy left to him. And as the stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance, the ranch settled into the rhythms of evening, doors closing, lamps lighting, families gathering, the simple, profound work of living. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be droughts to weather, conflicts to resolve, difficult decisions to make. But tonight, standing on this veranda with a friend beside him and a valley full of people who trusted him, Caleb Rourke was exactly where he was meant to be. Home. The word no longer tasted like exile. It tasted like promise, like hope, like a future worth fighting for. And that, he realized, was the greatest victory of all. The desert wind whispered through the cottonwoods, carrying with it the scent of sage and water and growing things. Somewhere an owl called, hunting in the darkness. Life continued its endless cycle, birth and death, loss and renewal, endings that became beginnings. Caleb drew a deep breath, filling his lungs with the sharp, clean air of the high desert. His uncle's words came back to him, spoken years ago when Caleb was just a boy learning to ride. This land doesn't belong to us, son. We belong to it. Our job is to hold it in trust for those who come after, to leave it better than we found it, to make sure that 100 years from now, people can still make a living here, can still call this place home. Caleb understood now. Understood in a way that only blood and sacrifice and hard-won wisdom could teach. The ranch wasn't just property, it was responsibility, legacy. A trust passed from generation to generation, held briefly by mortal hands but belonging ultimately to time itself. And he would hold it well, would fight for it, would build it into something his uncle would be proud of, would make sure that when his own time came, he could pass it on knowing he'd kept faith with those who came before. The stars blazed overhead, infinite and eternal, and beneath them, in a valley carved by water and shaped by human will, Red Mesa slept peacefully for the first time in months. The age of fear was over. The age of building had begun. And Caleb Rourke, once a reluctant heir, now stood as guardian of a dream bigger than any one person. A dream of justice, of community, of land held in sacred trust. He had come home at last, and he would never leave again. The end of the nightmare. The beginning of everything else.